we are going to have a conversation about hookup culture, porn, toxic feminism, and the fall of modern civilization.
There you go. Just, just a light conversation, nothing major.
Right, right. So we were actually having this conversation together last week, and I was like, we should record this.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
frequently how our conversations go, though. We have some good
definitely.
conversations. So it's
For
always nice
sure.
to have friends that you can have those candid conversations with.
Yeah,
Um, but so I'm going to start us out with
sure.
a brief story about toxic feminism. So
Okay.
I grew up in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And as most of us women who did grow up in that era, there was definitely a culture of this hardcore feminism where we very much raged against anything feminine about
Yeah.
ourselves and denounced our femininity. And it was thought that we needed to be more like men
Mm-hmm.
in order to be successful in life and in the world and to oppose the patriarchy or whatever we want to call it.
Right.
But so when I was about 10 years old, I used to sit next to the television, and this was, in a time of like very basic cable TV, nothing like, what our world of television and media is
Yeah.
now. I would sit there with a notebook, and I would keep track of all the commercials that would come on that I thought were
Oh,
sexist.
wow.
And then at 10 years old, I would write handwritten letters to the corporations, making some suggestions on how they could change their marketing to be more inclusive of men and women doing feminine things
Oh,
together.
wow.
So I'll give you an example. One of them, and I actually got a letter back from Kellogg's for
Mm.
this. I wrote a letter to Kellogg's, and I told them um, their commercials of women making Rice Krispie treats could maybe use some improvement by maybe showing a man and woman making Rice Krispie
Wow.
treats together. And
Wow.
they
Okay.
actually wrote me back and told me they were taking it into consideration. And obviously, they were just humoring a 10-year-old little girl who had an activism streak in her. But
Yeah.
I would
That's
like
pretty
nothing
impressive.
more. Yeah, I would like nothing more at this point in my life than to just be able to spend a tremendous amount of time in my kitchen cooking. So
You know,
there's there's some irony there.
no, I mean, the thing is, and sometimes it may come off in this climate as chauvinistic,
Hmm.
but, as the saying goes, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
sure.
So it's like, if you know how to prepare a good meal,
Hmm.
and that's a game changer. Oh my God, because so many guys haven't developed that skill set. And I think it's good for a man and a woman to actually have that skill set to
Oh,
one degree or
totally.
another. Although you have some, folks that are just more inclined to be great in the kitchen than others. I know I have a lot of challenges with meal prep. So, but no, I mean, it's amazing that you at 10 years of age were so impelled or compelled, I guess I want to say, to
Yeah.
really write Kellogg's and some of these other companies and bring what you saw as an issue to their attention. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's like, wow,
Now
I
I
never
feel
had that thought at 10.
no,
I'm an idiot at kind of
right?
stuff. Like,
Like I feel like that energy might be better directed elsewhere at this point in my life. But
yeah,
I mean, definitely, as a 10-year-old, I had a lot of strong opinions even then.
right.
Um, but I mean, just, in the post-divorce realm of having done a fair amount of dating, like
Yeah.
cooking a meal for a man is actually one of my favorite things to do. Like, let's spend Friday night, I cook and, we watch a movie on the couch. Like,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
love
just,
that.
in a true sense, the only reason I am motivated to have these conversations, and particularly when it comes to men and women, is to have people get back to the fundamentals or the basics, as I like to call it. And, a woman that I dated recently, one of the best experiences that we had was when, because she cooks all the time, was we took some time to prepare a meal together.
Hmm.
And she was really patient with me and showed me how to make these one particular type of pastries or whatever. And it was a great bonding experience. And to me, those are the things that keep men and women connected when we do more stuff like that, when we cook together, Or, you know, watch a movie, like you said, afterwards. You watch a movie after you've made a meal together. Maybe you go on a hike. You
Hmm.
take time getting to know each other, actually in communication, having conversations. And that creates that intimacy that's
Hmm.
such a drawing card for so many of us. And I think that's what's lacking in so many people's lives is that intimate connection
Hmm.
because there's so much of a lust energy out in the universe, out in the world, whether it's virtual or in the real world, to where people are just being dominated by their lower chakra, the desire to get laid, as opposed to actually forming a connection, you know what I'm saying, and getting to know the other person and finding out who this person really is.
Yeah. And I will say, like, a lot of the work I do now, I'm very much driven to do because I have two teenagers and I have one of each. I have a boy and a girl.
Yeah,
Um, and I am terrified at the sexual and relational culture that they're growing up in. And I
yeah,
feel like I personally have to do so much example setting and education in order for them to grow up in functional relationships and not just how that plays out in terms of their relationships, but their health,
yeah,
because so much of my practice is based on how do our relationships impact our physical and mental health very directly.
yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of people maybe make the academic or intellectual leap to think about that, about
Hmm.
how exactly our physical health is impacted by our relationships. But I would say it's far more important than even nutrition. Both are very important, but I would say the nutrition you have in a relational alchemy kind of
Hmm.
way with other people, and especially your romantic partner,
Yeah,
definitely plays out in the chemistry and physiology of your body.
for sure. I totally agree. And I think that's been my assessment for quite some time. You know, I've studied health and nutrition for quite a while,
Hmm.
and it's great to know what to put in your body and to eat at the right times and what foods to eat and things like that, and you know, avoid GMOs and all that kind of great stuff. And at the same time, my contention has been if we are in a healthy relationship, it's like we're more inclined to want to take care of our health. We're more
Hmm.
inclined to want to stay physically attractive for our spouse.
Exactly.
Um, and those good endorphins, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the healthy form of
Hmm.
dopamine, um, those things are amazing healers.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when that's not present in our lives, I know for myself at times, like you say, you know, you hear people talk about going to comfort food, you know,
Hmm.
to kind of replace what you're not getting from the intimate component in your life. And so it's like, yeah, you know, be conscious of what you eat. And, you know, what do they say? What is it? The placebo effect about how powerful the mind is. You give one group this drug and you say it's the sugar pill, and you give the other group the sugar pill and you say it's the drug. That's how powerful the mind is. So when we're actually in a space of having healthy connections with other people,
Hmm.
it just facilitates health and healing a lot easier.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always say I'm very mindful about what I put into my body, and you can read into
Yeah,
that
no, I
whatever.
totally get that. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, it all plays a role, and the nutrition, the health coaching program that I went through was the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I remember the framework they had. I absolutely loved, and I didn't know that going into the program,
Yeah.
but they had what they called primary food and secondary food. And secondary food was the actual physical food sustenance you put on your body,
Oh,
in your
wow.
body.
Okay.
And primary food was everything else. So your relationships, your job, your sense of purpose, all of that was really more important than the actual food,
Yeah.
even though food was primarily what we were learning there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think all of those things are super, super important. And the relationship in particular is incredibly important. I think there is a lot that has been lost in the concept of courtship uh,
Hmm.
in modern dating,
Big
and certainly with,
time.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, with the whole dating app thing. And like, even I was talking to my daughter,
Yeah.
and a lot of these kids aren't dating people at their own schools. They're
Mhm.
dating people from other cities. I'm like, where do they meet these people? And she's like, oh, they
Wow.
meet on Snapchat. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
these kids can't even drive, and they're like meeting people who live 45 minutes away to date. And I'm
That
just
is
like, okay.
unbelievable. I mean, and again, that's a part of the pros and cons of this social media virtual experience is that there is no substitute for meeting somebody face to face in person. It's just like talking on the phone. It's
Hmm.
great to have a conversation with somebody, but there's no substitute for us meeting at I don't even want to say star or whatever, but
A
meeting
coffee
at a
shop.
local family
Yeah.
owned
Yeah.
coffee shop, support small business.
Yeah.
And just having a conversation face to face in person. That's a game changer. And so much of that is lost when people are spend so much time on this thing. I have to catch myself to, kind of curtail my time on here.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and I think I had sent you earlier in the week a post that was on Instagram, and it was about these AI influencers that are like female
Mm-hmm.
personas and
Yep.
very perfect looking
Perfect
women.
looking.
And
Yeah.
they're creating these accounts. I don't know who they is. Maybe the AI is at a point where they're creating their own accounts. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But they're creating these accounts to appeal to lonely men and then lure them over to these fake women's OnlyFans accounts or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that really says something about the state of the world we're in, where people are so lonely and disconnected that they're willing to have a fake relationship of some sort with not even a real woman who's on a computer screen somewhere, but like a fake AI generated
Yeah.
persona. Um, and what does that say about how lonely and disconnected people are really feeling in this day and age, and how technology has played into that disconnect?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And as you were saying that, it made me think about the movie with Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock from back in the day. I think it was Demolition Man or something like that. They were about to have sex, or so he thought. And then she said, "Oh no, we don't do it that way anymore. Put on these glasses." And they never touched each other. It was it was a virtual form of intimacy. I was like, "What?"
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's and then, you touch on a very, I guess I want to say kind of a sensitive topic, but that's a very relevant topic about lonely
Hmm.
people. And I've seen a lot of posts about men that are lonely.
Yeah.
I've gone through periods of that myself. I'll be the first to admit that. And at the same time, I think when you have a purpose in your life as a man or as a woman, it dissipates whatever might occur or show up from time to time as being lonely. You
Hmm.
are actually in a space where you can shift that into being, at home with your aloneness as you are building what you're creating for yourself in your life, whether it's your business or your career, and you're investing all your time and energy on fulfilling the purpose that the creator gave you in
Hmm.
terms of why you came here in the first place. So that when you meet that person, you're better situated to really be able to walk powerfully into that relationship and say, hey, let's do the doggone thing.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that's one of the things that's missing is, men and women not having a purpose. And I would say probably maybe even a little more so for men. And anytime we're driven by those lower base urges
Hmm.
to just want to have sex all the time, and it's just a natural human thing to want to have sex, but it's
Hmm.
like, to me, the bigger part that ends up being a missing is, again, like what I mentioned earlier, if you're not taking the time to kind of explore and find out who this person is, what are they committed to, what are their goals, what are their passions in life, what do they want? Because other than that, I mean, hell, you could get sex anywhere.
Hmm.
So it's like,
Exactly.
if that's all you want, then great. But it's like, if you want something that has more
Hmm.
substance with a much better chance of longevity,
Hmm.
then take some time and really do your due diligence like you would do for anything else that's important in your life.
Hmm. And I mean, I think at the heart of it, most people are looking for that deeper meaning and connection and purpose and how to share that with another person. But there's a certain level of self-awareness that has to be present in order for people to seek that in a
Yeah.
meaningful way. And I think, more than our disconnect from other people, I think so many people are very disconnected from themselves. And this like fractured sense of self is
Yeah.
what is contributing to so many of the different ills in the world, including people's, physical diseases and mental diseases.
Yeah.
That's just playing a huge factor in that. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
lots of stuff happening in the world in that respect.
And to kind of piggyback on something you're saying there, one of the things that I'm always present to because I just started back to working out with my Tai Chi master and
I
martial
love
arts
it.
is, anytime you're doing any type of physical activity, it's a kick in the ass. So excuse my language, but that's just how that's my form of self-expression sometimes,
Hmm.
is that when I'm exerting and putting all of this energy into doing these different forms and these different practices and holding these different postures, the thing that always shows up for me is just how precious energy is. And
Hmm.
it's like, why would you want to give your energy to somebody who doesn't value it in the same way that you do? This
Hmm.
body, this gift that we've been given, this physical vessel is an amazing instrument. And when you're working to get it in the best shape that you can get it in and putting all that energy into it, it's like, I mean, my major takeaway is always like, wow, energy is so powerful. Energy is so precious. So why just give it to anybody? Take
Yeah,
your time and do that inner work. Do your meditation, do your prayer work, whatever it is that helps you to stay grounded, especially in these wacky times that we're in now,
hmm,
to where you can stay more focused and more on point with what you're committed to having more of in your life. And the last thing you want to do is waste that energy on somebody who doesn't have an appreciation for it to some degree in the way that you do.
right, right. And I will say, like, from a sexual standpoint, I think when you have two people that are committed to what you just said, the possibilities for expanding that experience into something that most people in our culture right now don't even have a concept of. I often say that most people are experiencing at best 5% of their sexual potential,
Hmm.
and that other 95% that they don't even understand the realm of possibilities in is the same exact life force, subtle life force energy that is available to create anything in this world, including our physical health. So when we're looking at all the physical and mental diseases
Hmm.
that are so chronic in our society today, that other 95%, when you learn how to work with it, will eliminate those disorders and diseases. So
Yeah.
I think it's so imperative that people really learn to work with their energy in whatever capacity, whether it's taking up a practice like Tai Chi or Qigong, or I think men in particular, and I've been talking to my teenage son about this recently,
Hmm.
should all participate in some kind of martial art. I think
For sure.
from understanding how energy works, learning how to manage emotions and anger, especially. I
Hmm.
think those types of disciplines are so powerful. And I think having a practice that involves energy as well as self defense and how to defend your family if you ever need it is so important. So that's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, and to that point, when you say that, it makes me think about because when I started to study sex and sexology and things like
Mhm.
that, I kind of gravitated more towards
Mhm.
Taoism than I did Tantra.
Yeah.
And Mantak Chia has a book called Cultivating Male Sexual Energy.
Hmm.
And that book was really profound in terms of my journey and it helping me to understand that whether it's martial arts in the traditional sense, in terms of how most people think of it, whether it's Wing Chun or Tai Chi or Qi Kong,
Hmm.
sexual Kung Fu is
Yeah.
a martial art.
Yeah.
And a part of what I'm always present to is how like what you touched on the percentages, right? In the book he talked about, I think there are like 9 different levels to orgasm, right?
Hmm.
Most people usually only get to like level 3 or 4. So
Right.
when you're tapping into those higher levels of orgasm, that's when you can literally experience heaven
Hmm.
on earth and that oneness of connection with you and your spouse.
Yeah.
That is an absolute game changer. And furthermore, to as a man to learn how to retain your semen and to not just ejaculate all the time is
Hmm.
really important and very powerful because that's one of the major components to being healthy. That's one of the major components to maintaining healthy levels of testosterone to
Right.
keep your woman attracted. And so when you're constantly expelling your seed all of the time,
Hmm.
you're actually diminishing the level of attraction that can occur and that's possible over time with your partner for the long term. So it's a lot to it, but the one little piece I would add to that is that when I shifted from Taoism, which kind of almost occurred to me kind of as like technical
Hmm.
and can bring on a little bit of performance anxiety because you're like, well, okay, am I doing it exactly right? So, but
Right.
when I started to learn about Karitsa, which is a more relaxed form of lovemaking where you're really just taking your time and enjoying your spouse, there's no outcome attachment, there's none of that. It's just you're really enjoying each other and exploring each other's bodies in a very relaxed and calm and enjoyable way. It's an absolute game changer. But I guess to the main point is those levels of what's possible in intimacy is amazing, and many of us, and I'm still not where I would like to be, have yet to experience those higher levels of what's possible, and it's entirely possible.
Right. And I think like the goal orientation in what call like the porn sex culture
Yeah.
very much parallels just the goal orientation we have in the culture at large. And when we start to appreciate the experience of just being present in the moment. And if you're
Yeah.
with a partner, being present with the partner in a way that doesn't have a specific goal in mind, that completely changes the dynamics of the relationship or whatever experience you're having in such a profound way, which is like, I think when most people hear the word tantra, they think of like the Kama Sutra and like weird sexual positions
Right.
or something. 95% of what tantra is has absolutely nothing to do with sex whatsoever. But the principles of it apply very well to sex. So I think there's a lot that can be learned just from studying yoga, even in general. I kind of say sometimes like yoga was the practice that introduced me to my body, and I don't even think I realized how disconnected I was from my own physical vessel before I
Mhm.
started doing yoga. And I was really 5 years into a yoga practice before that even clicked for me. I was
Wow.
just doing it as a physical practice. And then one day it just like made sense. The whole being present in the moment and being present with the physical sensations of your body. Just, it all just made sense like in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. I mean, that's the one thing about yoga or qigong, tai chi, a lot of those different martial arts.
Hmm.
There's nothing against, high intensity interval training and things like
Yeah.
that, but those are more outward and more. That's one of the things I notice about the West and the East is
Yeah.
that in the Eastern philosophy, it's more focused on like a spiritual component to your
Hmm.
practice, being really in touch with your body. Because even like the exercises that my instructor has me doing, they're core exercises. So like
Hmm.
planks and um, the horse stance, different things like that that actually help to strengthen the core.
Right.
It's a strength from the inside out that
Hmm.
actually takes your strength to the next level besides just lifting, a set of barbells or whatever. And there's nothing against, lifting barbells, but the point is it's more of a spirit, mind, body connection. And
Hmm.
that to me is the game changer because it does allow us to really get in touch with our body and to be more present. Because that's one of the things that I got when I started studying and practicing martial arts was that I was able to get out of my head
Yeah.
and into my physical body and just feel. And I
Right.
think that is one of the things that takes people out when it comes to intimacy a lot of times is that we get in our head, especially a lot of times with guys, because we're so focused on pleasing our partner that we get in our head as opposed to being just present for the experience and for her and just enjoying each other. And
Hmm.
that's absolute magic right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about patriarchy. I interviewed Brendan Marotta about his newer book, Children's Justice, last fall.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and he has a chapter in that book about patriarchy and about how women are really the agents of patriarchy now rather than men.
Mm.
And I remember when I first read that, I was kind of triggered. Like, I
Right.
was like, what is he talking about? That
Right.
doesn't make any sense. And then I started to think about it, and he really kind of dissects the fact that women still are the primary caregivers of very young children, and that's
Hmm.
where that dynamic starts. Where when boys are being raised in a manner where they are violated, even his work is very much based on circumcision
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah, yeah.
educating people on why that practice really should not be practiced anymore.
Barbaric.
Yeah, how many men are violated at a very young age and how that plays out into adulthood and then their very screwed up relationships with women later in life based on those early childhood experiences.
Yeah.
And it really did get me thinking a lot about women's role in perpetuating patriarchy. And again, kind of like I was saying earlier, how I grew up in an era, and I think we're still in the midst of that era where women are taught that being feminine and the traits of femininity are not valuable, and that if we want to prosper in the world and be successful, we kind of have to rage against men
Mm.
and take on a take on the more masculine aspects of our own personalities, which in the end doesn't really serve us. And
Yeah.
that's something that I've had to learn to step into more later in life, is to really appreciate my feminine qualities, and kind of let my more masculine ones take a back seat in many cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful statement because to me, and I just had a post on Facebook earlier today that kind of was touching on this, and
Hmm.
one of the women kind of responded in a way where she was triggered essentially. And the things that I post, I don't post from that point of view. I know that it can occur for people a particular way based on, their life experiences and where they're listening from. But it's like when you look at the core primal aspect of a man and a man is attracted to a woman that's feminine. And
Hmm.
dare I say it, submissive. That's almost like a curse word in Western
Right.
society,
Right.
right? But at the same time, a woman that's in touch with her femininity can get anything she wants from a man. I mean, we're not that difficult. I mean, and when a woman is really in touch with her divine feminine, a man will go to the end of the earth to make sure that this woman is provided for, that she's
Hmm.
protected. Even if he can't, he'll do everything he can to try to facilitate that. And so to have uh, this Jedi mind trick that's been run on men and women in Western society, to where women are, trying to be more men than men are, and
Hmm.
you have a lot of guys that are so in touch with their feelings. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. We're supposed to
Right.
be in touch with our feelings, but it's like if it's unbalanced, that's not healthy either. And a
Right.
lot of, in a situation where a woman is going out into a male dominated industry to make money, a lot of times, I even had one of my old bosses say this, but she had an awareness about her because I think she was from Northern Africa. And part of what she said was, she said, Dean, when I get home, I check that energy at the door,
Hmm.
and I'm paraphrasing, but she was like, I drop down, so to speak, for the lack of a
Hmm.
better term, into my
Yeah.
femininity, and then
Right.
I bring that to my man, and that's what makes the difference in our relationship.
Hmm.
Because most men that I know of that are in touch with their masculinity in any way, shape, or form are not attracted to women that are more masculine than they are feminine in terms of the energy that they're bringing into a relationship. It's a turnoff.
Right. And I think that's a big part of what's playing out on the societal landscape now, and why we
Yeah.
have such a high divorce rate and so many women who are just like, I'm done with men.
Yeah.
And I mean, the majority of divorces are initiated by women at this point. But I think there is an art form, whether you're a man or woman, to learn how to be soft and strong,
Yeah.
and how that balance is different on the feminine end of the spectrum versus the masculine end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there's a lot of self-education and self-study that goes into learning how to finesse that in a way that is serving your own interests as well as contributing to a partnership, if that's something you're choosing to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I read a book recently. I'm trying to remember. The Surrendered Wife is what it was called.
Okay. Sounds
It,
interesting.
there were a lot of good points in it, but I also listened to it as like an audiobook, and like this woman just, no
Yeah.
offense to, hopefully she never listens to this, but she just sounded like an airhead. I'm
Oh,
like,
okay. Right. Right. Right.
like that feels like it's gone too far into that end of the spectrum. But a lot of the things she's saying really did resonate, and she talked a lot about how a man needs to feel trusted
Mm-hmm.
by his woman,
Yeah.
and how we have developed um, through this dynamic of women becoming more masculine and men becoming almost more feminine, or like beta males rather than
Mm-hmm.
conscious alpha males.
Yeah.
This dynamic whereby women almost end up in a mother-son relationship with their husbands or romantic partners, and how that's not serving anybody, and that's not going to be conducive to maintaining a healthy long-term relationship in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that inversion just creates a host of problems. There's
Hmm.
a book that I have. I was trying to find it before we got on today, but it's oh God, I forget. But two of the chapters, one is on sex, and the other one is on sex and sexual mastery. But it talks
Hmm.
about the energy of male-female interaction and how important it is for it to be as harmonious and as balanced as possible. And when it's an imbalance, like it is in so many ways in society nowadays, you just have inversions all over the place, you
Hmm.
know, and so it can be a touchy subject, but when you go to, dare I say it, the science behind it, it all really makes sense. It's
Hmm.
just that a lot of us are not. It's like, I've recently started studying law again because of my desire to, just know certain things when it comes to, God forbid I get in a traffic stop, or legal things when it comes to the Constitution. Those are the things that at one time in America was a much more educated, more knowledgeable society than it is now. The dumbing down process of society has occurred in so many different ways, whether it's sex, whether it's finance, whether it's relationships, whether it's spirituality, health, you name it, to where I think, you had touched on it earlier about the fall of civilization.
Hmm.
It's like we're kind of almost there, and not, and that's not really cool to say the least.
Right, right. And where this conversation started with you and I last week, and I joked that I was going to make a tinfoil hat to
Yeah.
wear for this conversation. I really was going to, but then I lost
Right.
track of time and I didn't actually make it. But
It's all good.
maybe our next
Yeah,
conversation, I'll make the
for
tinfoil
sure.
hat. But this whole concept that much of this, the way that male and female relationships are playing out on the current cultural landscape has been very much socially engineered on purpose, in my
Definitely.
opinion.
Without a doubt.
And I think that when we look back to the middle of the last century, we kind of make jokes about, the 1950s housewife or whatever. But there's been a very deliberate attempt to get women into the
Hmm.
workplace for a variety of reasons, including making households dependent on needing two incomes in order to maintain the same standard of living as what could once have been done with just one income.
Right.
You've now got two taxpayers out in the workforce,
Hmm.
And we're also shuffling the children into this farm school industrialized system of education that's also been created to have, a standardization and indoctrination component
Hmm.
to how children are raised, which is very different than how it would happen if you have the mother at home, or possibly the father, but usually the mother at home,
Hmm.
in charge of the education and rearing and instilling of values in their children rather than outsourcing that to the state.
Exactly.
The state shouldn't be raising children,
No.
and this is one area where, if I could go back in time, my children were originally in Montessori school,
Hmm.
um, and I kind of wish I had either left them there or done more of a collective homeschooling type of experience with them, or Waldorf schooling. I think is actually probably the best if you're not going to homeschool.
Hmm.
Um, the principles of that and allowing children to just be children rather than raising them to be good test takers,
Exactly.
is so
And
much more.
memorizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that's a great point. I mean, and I didn't mean to cut you off. If
no,
you,
that's okay.
oh, okay. No, I was working at a health food store back in Atlanta, and one of the days, one of the guys came in. He was actually the superintendent of the Milwaukee County school system, and he gave me, and I still have it somewhere. He gave me two documents. One of them showed that if you are not reading at a certain level by the fourth grade, they already have a prison cell waiting for you because they know you're coming.
Oh,
It is
oh
a
my
it
gosh.
is it's a feeder system. So
Yeah,
it's not, again, it's all written. This is not conspiracy.
right.
It's just like, again, if you don't take the time to research, if you don't take the time to study, then you will take everything you see in the so-called mainstream media as being the gospel without having done any critical thinking yourself to say, well, hold up, something about this doesn't jive. It doesn't resonate well in my spirit. And to me, to be able to homeschool your children or have as much of a hands-on experience as possible when it comes to their young life and their development goes a long way to having them be, very intelligent, critical thinking adults that question things and don't just go along with everything. It's like, no,
Exactly.
I'm not saying, if I was a parent, I'm not saying I want you questioning everything that I do, but if you have questions sometimes, okay, I got it. I'm still the head of the house, but you can ask questions. It's just
Hmm.
that we've kind of lost our way.
Yeah. And back to the whole like patriarchy and boys playing boys' relationship with their
Yeah,
caregivers. I think that really plays out in this whole social engineering thing too, because strong masculine men are the foundation of a free
for
society.
sure.
And the social architects know that if you can create these, I'm using the term beta males here,
Hmm.
you can break down the free society. And dare I say, the events of the last 3 years, I think, have really shone a light onto everybody. But, in terms of men and in terms of, a single woman out in the world, the attractiveness factor of a man who has a very um, dysfunctional relationship with authority figures is a huge turnoff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I've had a few scenarios in the dating realm where men have presented themselves in a way where they come across as weak, and
Yeah.
women are not attracted to weak men,
Not at
despite
all.
what they might say or how they present themselves. Um, no woman wants to have sex with a beta male.
Exactly. It's no driver. There's no attraction there, and
Mm-mm.
that's why to me, it kind of makes me think about a friend of mine that he said, this, he said it a particular way. But he said, Dean, women come out the womb with game, so to speak. A
Mm-hmm.
man has to cultivate and develop his masculine qualities over the course of a life,
Yeah.
because from an elemental point of view, women are water and and earth, a man
Hmm.
is fire and
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
So, and if you have water and fire, what can water do to a fire?
Hmm.
Water puts out a fire.
Right.
So over time, when you see a man in a long-term relationship, let's say marriage, a lot of times it's like they're a shell of their former self because they've just kind of given up.
Yeah.
And a woman will, a lot of times tolerate it because maybe he's a good provider and they've been together for years, but the attraction has probably long since been gone.
Right.
And so that's why to me, as a man, learning, different things to help you to stay sharp, whether it's training in martial arts or learning self-defense, whether it's using weapons or just different things like that. As the one guy said, do hard things as a man. It helps to increase your testosterone
Yeah.
levels, right?
Hmm.
And it's almost like that's vilified in today's society. Not almost, in many respects, it is like it's toxic or it's wrong to be a man. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, isn't this what is my natural state?
Hmm.
As this person, and just like a woman is, her natural state is a particular way. So
Right.
yeah, it's. And the one last piece I would add to that is my reflection growing up is that anytime you destabilize the family unit, it's just a matter of time before the society as we know it becomes a mush. And that's
Exactly.
essentially what we're in now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing now, and the degradation of family values and how hookup culture plays into that. And these are the values I'm trying to instill in my kids, and hopefully that, it rubs off onto their friends and so forth too, is that when you value yourself, hookup culture isn't going to be something you're going to want to participate in. It's not even
Exactly.
going to seem appealing in any way, shape, or form. And I think the hookup culture and even porn culture is so much a reflection of people having this fractured sense of self and not valuing
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
I could not agree more. Self love and self worth is
Mm.
everything.
Yeah.
And, I'm not religious, but you know, I've kind of gotten to a point now from some of the research that I've done. I don't even think you should have sex before
Mm.
marriage. I really don't. Sex, to me, sex messes things up. I know that that's radical to say that, but until you've taken the time to get to know the person, I mean, this is an important choice. I mean, and
Hmm.
there are no guarantees, but
Hmm.
you do everything you can to do your due diligence and make sure this is the person that you really are wanting to commit yourself to.
Hmm.
And, when there's children involved, that's another factor to consider. And ideally, even with all of that, you still want to be able to enjoy each other and laugh and have a good time. It's just that it's like it's serious, but maybe not to be so significant about it to where it steals the joy out of your
Right.
connection with the person, what you're
Right.
creating.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of touched on like the neurochemistry of this all earlier a little bit, and, the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And like hookup culture is very much based on that dopamine hit. And when we're talking about long-term bonding chemistry, we're really talking about oxytocin and some other, chemicals that play into the mix. And I know I've kind of researched like the whole concept of dopamine. Dopamine is more about the wanting,
Hmm.
not the having. Oxytocin is about the having and the keeping.
Yeah.
Dopamine is more about the longing for what you think might happen. And as soon as you've happened, in whatever that circumstance is, it's over. Like
Yeah.
you never have that same level of dopamine hit with that person again. And if you're just chasing the dopamine all the time, it's never going to be enough, which is why we're seeing, I think, this like chronic problem, especially of younger men
Hmm.
who've gotten addicted to porn and have to um, participate in increasingly exciting or degrading or just to get enough of a dopamine hit out of it,
Hmm.
it always has to escalate to another level to the point where having normal sex with a real woman isn't even possible
Exactly.
anymore, and we're seeing an epidemic of young men with erectile dysfunction because they've spent so much time in the porn world, that now, they can't achieve an erection on their own. And it's destroying relationships, and
Yeah.
pain is an incredible teacher, and I think some of these younger men are seeing, like, okay, once we've hit that point, it's a way to reconnect with yourself and realize, I do want something more, and I do want same thing, a deep, meaningful connection with a woman. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that sometimes has to be the lesson they learn before they can get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, because intimacy is something that takes time. And when you're talking about porn and that immediate rush of adrenaline that you get from watching it and seeing people do what they do,
Hmm.
it, and then there's the masturbation and all the other things that come from that, man, Tank Chia talked about how really
Hmm.
you shouldn't do it, and I was like, wow, that was kind of profound to hear that, but it made a
Hmm.
lot of sense. It's still something that steals from an authentic connection with another human being, as you're touching on.
Hmm.
And that's where, to me, having those radical, maybe I would say, self love practices. I mean, just, whether it's your martial arts or meditation or giving, and I'm not religious, but I
Hmm.
can see why, some people get to a point where they give themselves to Christ, or they devote themselves to a religion, because there's so much in the way of distractions and perversions in the world. And that's being done deliberately to keep people from their purpose and to keep people from really being a contribution to the betterment of humanity, because
Exactly.
humanity is in a major crisis right now. And if there is anything that we need more so than anything, is people that are doing the inner work so that we can have those healthier relationships with self first and then with
Yes.
another human being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can only love another person as much as you love yourself. And this is where I think we're seeing a real deficit in the world, because so many people are coming to a relationship without first cultivating a relationship with themselves, and
Exactly.
having a deep appreciation and value for themselves before trying to get involved with another person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of why, if you get into that rush scenario and you're dominated by lust and that dopamine, urge, it basically blinds you to what's possible. I had to catch myself at times when I meet somebody, a young lady, a woman I just met recently, who we hit it off really well, and I was like, whoa, it's like, slow down, bro, take your time,
Right.
get to know her, find out
Right.
more. I mean, she's we've had great conversations, but it's like, take your time. There's no need to rush.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that, in particular for men, because we're more immediate than a woman,
Hmm.
it takes a little bit more for us to cultivate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, like, in my own experience, having a courtship where you get to know somebody just on a friendly level, for months, uh, has always been the key to ending up in a stable relationship. Any situation I've ever been in where it moved too quickly, it ended like immediately, because that
Yep.
just doesn't work, particularly for a woman's biology.
Right.
I think sometimes we try to convince ourselves otherwise,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't work that way. So,
Mm-mm. No,
and
it
I
doesn't.
think that's a blessing, really.
It is. I mean, nature is
Mhm.
perfect. God, the creator, he designed us, beautifully, I mean, magically, and
Mhm.
so it's like, I guess I get the thought that occurs to me is like, I was watching this one documentary and they're talking about how people in the West, and I think they were more so talking about the social engineers or the political folks of the day, are at war with nature. But
Yeah.
the best thing that we can do
Hmm.
is to become one with nature, because
Exactly.
becoming one with nature, to me, is becoming one with God. God
Yeah.
and nature, or as the one scripture says, I and the Father are one.
Hmm.
We're a part of that same energy. The Spirit of God, the presence of God is with us at all times. And the more that we connect to that, I
Hmm.
think we have so much more available to us in the way of possibility, and dare I say it, as I like to say sometimes, to the opportunity to experience heaven on earth with
Mm,
another person,
yeah.
and in our quiet times of reflection, with ourselves and the Creator.
And I will say of the nature point too, nature is very much feminine.
It
And
is,
I've
yes.
discovered in my own like post-divorce like dating realm, I'm very much attracted to men who love nature.
Hmm.
And masculine men tend to be drawn towards the feminine of nature very much.
All the time.
Yeah. So that's always been a huge factor for me personally,
Yeah,
but I think there are a lot of women who can probably resonate with that.
yeah.
Um, I don't think we can really have a conversation about toxic feminism without discussing hormonal birth control, or maybe
Oh
just birth
wow, yeah,
control
that's a
in
big one.
general.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a huge one, and I'll just share my own personal experience. I spent about 12 years on birth control pills, and those are 12 years I wish I could get back of my
Wow.
life.
Yeah.
And especially in with women, conversations I've had with women in my age group who are past, they're done having children, but reflecting back on their younger years. I don't know any women who say, "Yeah, I felt great when I was on birth control. It was wonderful." Um, I look at it as I was terrified of my own body and had
Mm,
no idea how it worked.
wow.
So this was the quick fix um, to try to control my body because the feminine body is just this wild, crazy thing that, nobody knows how to. Nobody ever told me that there's only 6 days out of the month that you can actually get pregnant if somebody's willing to educate you on that process. But there's a
Mm.
reason they don't educate you on that
Oh
process.
heck yeah.
And this ties back into the farm schooling system where kids are getting such a sex education actually in the school system. They're not going to teach women cycle tracking and fertility awareness based methods. There's an advantage to women being terrified of their
It,
bodies.
it is.
And there's an inherent disconnect that comes with engaging with synthetic hormones or potentially even, bioidentical type hormones, where it disconnects you from your intuition. And they've
Hmm.
even done studies with women on birth control and done like these smell tests. Have you seen this where they give them
Uh,
the t-shirts of men?
uh.
Um, and ask them like which man would you select just based on the smell of these t-shirts.
Yeah.
And the men that women pick or the men that women pick when they're on birth control versus off are like completely different
Oh
men
wow.
because it's so just that those pheromones they're getting so disconnected from their natural innate bodily intelligence via these pharmaceutical interventions
Hmm.
that they're not even selecting the right mates because their intuition is cut off from that and their intelligence is cut off from that, which is a travesty. But I think there are more women getting educated on the fact that, especially with these apps now, where you can track your cycle on your
Hmm.
phone,
Hmm.
and it's so much more an intelligent process. That there are younger women, I think, now that are on to this,
Yeah.
and they've heard enough horror stories. There's the documentary that Ricky Lake and Abby Epstein put out. They
The
did the
business
business.
of being warned.
There's the business of being born, but they also did a new one on the business of birth control,
Oh wow. Okay.
and went through kind of the pharmaceutical history of where the birth control came from and what women's actual experiences were with it versus what the pharmaceutical reps are telling you they are.
Wow.
Uh, and I think there is a lot more educational opportunity at this point to learn how to connect with your body and not be terrified of getting pregnant because if you know how your body works, then it's really not that it's not rocket science. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's actually, as you were saying that, it makes me think about a woman I dated years ago, and this was before I had any awareness about health or anything like that. And
Mhm.
she was doing Depo-Provera, like the shot that you get.
Oh yeah. That's dreadful.
And I didn't know anything at that time. And then we broke up, and then years later I reconnected with her, and her voice had changed. It had become like more masculine. I was like, whoa, I mean, this is not the same woman I remember.
Right.
And I don't know that I could say that I can trace it to the shot. So I can't, I didn't do empirical research or whatever.
Right.
But I always felt like there's something intuitively, because I've operated based on intuition most of my life, even when I didn't think I was.
Mm-hmm.
And intuitively, I'm like, there's something about that that's just not right. It's like
Right.
you're interfering with the body's natural process.
Exactly. And I think that was all by design.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of this was, oh, whoops, we kind of screwed up there. I think that there are people working behind the scenes who knew exactly what they were doing, particularly with that. But,
For
it
sure.
goes into the food system, the schooling system, the government system, the pharmaceuticals, all of it.
Yeah.
But there are those of us who are onto them.
Yeah, there you go.
And awareness, self-awareness first, but then an awareness you can share with others too, I think is the key to undoing the ills that have brought civilization to the point we're at now. And I think we're at a breaking point where we can't sustain what has happened to this point. Uh, and I'm hopeful that there are enough people waking up to the fact that we're just living out of alignment with our own biology and with nature. And we've been engulfed in this culture of, I don't really even like the word patriarchy anymore,
Hmm.
but this Western patriarchy of man overcoming nature or dominating
Yeah,
nature rather
exactly.
than living in harmony with nature.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was touching on earlier. It's like it's a competition. Why are you trying to compete with nature?
Mm-hmm.
Be one with nature. That's where
Mm-hmm.
the answers come from. As I
Mm-hmm.
like to say, and I touch on this in my book that's coming up, the term I use is spiritual downloads. I get
Yeah.
most of my spiritual downloads if I'm spending time in nature. Even before the call today, I went outside and stood on the ground with my
Mm-hmm.
bare feet. I tried to do it for 21 minutes. I know that's like the minimum. But a
Yeah.
grounding or earthing, as it's called, as I'm sure many of your listeners know about, because it's another way to help reset our body and help us to be more in tune and circadian rhythms and all that kind of good stuff. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just that we've gotten so caught up in all of these endless distractions that at times that's where we end up missing important messages that I think God is attempting to kind of drop into our spirit about birth control or about
Mm-hmm.
what's being done in the educational system or about what's going on in politics or whatever. It's like when you really just, and a lot of times when I get a message, I don't need somebody to confirm what I know in my spirit to be
Right.
true.
Right.
It's like, no, I know that's from God. I know that's from me being in tune with self and that epiphany or that aha moment that I just got. That's
Mm-hmm.
something saying something's not right here. Let me question this or dig a little deeper because I'm not just going to take this at face value,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I think too, based on what you just said, so much of this term evidence-based has been used as almost a marketing term at this point
Hmm.
to marginalize people's lived experiences
Right.
and to get people to question their intuition or their innate knowing in favor of outsourcing any decision they might make to a pseudo external authority figure,
Hmm.
which I think is unfortunate because as we start to learn more about intuition and how disconnected, the current generations of people have become with that, there's also a knowing of how to reconnect with it. And, even on a more environmental level, the things we can do to increase our pineal
Hmm.
gland health, which is where our intuition is housed, the more we can reconnect with that and dissociate from the need to outsource everything to evidence from somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most fundamental ways that that's accomplished is through meditation.
Hmm.
I'm working at just being more regular with my meditation practice. It's a game changer. You know, it really is about um, how does that one scripture in the Bible say, "Be still and know that I am
Yes.
God" or something, or "Peace,
Yeah.
be still." It
Stillness.
really, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everything resides within that in terms of those answers that just help us to know what actions to take,
Mhm.
what moves to make, you know, different things along those lines that help us on our path in life. And that's really what it's all about.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you have anything else you want to add to this conversation? Because I think we may have to do a part two at some point,
Yeah,
but this has
yeah.
been great.
No, it has been, and thank you for this opportunity,
Of
Jen. It's
course.
awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know that I really have anything else at the present time. I'm gonna, throw in a shameless plug for my book, the book on
Yes, do
healthy
it,
living,
please. Yep.
11 fundamental ways to create a balanced and fulfilling life. That is the website is actually thebookonhealthyliving.com,
Okay.
and it'll be out really by Labor Day. So I'm super
Awesome.
excited about that. And a lot of the things that we've talked about in this live are the things that I talk about in the book.
Oh,
And it
that's
really
great.
is yeah, and thank you. And it's really about just what the title says, the 11 fundamental ways to create a balanced and fulfilling life. So
Yeah.
we can get back to basics because, in a truest sense, it's not rocket science. It's one of my favorite books that I read years ago was The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity by
I love
Daniel
that one.
Reed. That
Yep.
book was like my Bible for a while because every time I would pick it up, I could not put it
Yeah.
down. And it really is about just getting back to basics. Uh, if we don't grow our own food, support local farmers that do, that don't spray with all types of chemicals.
Right.
Try to, sit down at the table and break bread together as a family if we can, or with our friends or with our community.
Mhm.
That's the good endorphins. That's the serotonin. That's the
Yeah.
oxytocin. That's the dopamine. I forget the other one. I know there's four, but
Yeah.
that's really the magic formula to having a really enjoyable life. And you can't put a price on that. You really
Mm-mm.
can't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No. No, that's great. Well, I look forward to reading it,
Yes,
and you'll have to send me the link to it. But yeah, this has been great, and
yes,
we may do a follow-up at some point, but I really appreciate all our listeners who joined us
for
today.
sure.
And you can probably, do you have a website that you want to plug?
I don't have a website other than the
The
book
book
website at this point.
website.
Yeah, the book
Okay.
website is again the
The book
www.thebookonhealthyliving.com.
on
And yeah,
healthyliving.com.
working on building out the rest of my entrepreneurial brand and doing my own website,
Yeah.
but it's not complete yet. So yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jen.
Well, thank you, Dean. And I'm sure I will be talking to you soon, but this was great. I really
For sure.
appreciate your time.
For sure. Thank
All
you.
right. We'll see you
Take care.
soon.
All
All
right.
right.
Bye bye.